Hello and welcome to Mediumship Matters with me, Hannah Macintyre. I hope you're all well. So today we're going to talk about the dark night of the soul. First of all, actually, what I'm going to say is I would like some feedback from you guys. So every single other podcast that I've been listening to has a really lengthy introduction with music and then an introduction to themselves and an introduction to what the podcast is about. Now, I know that I'm a bit of a, I don't know what the word is, blunt person. I don't know. I just can't be bothered with stuff like that. Do you feel like this podcast is missing something? It just occurred to me as I went straight into my topic that I didn't say, "Hi, I'm Hannah. I've been working with the spirit world for this amount of time, and I'm here to share my journey with you." Should I be doing stuff like that? Would that make it more professional? It probably would. I'll think about it. Anyway, today's podcast, I am going straight in, is titled Dark Night of the Soul. And this is a term that you may have heard bandied around by spiritual people, a bit like a badge of honour. And a bit, I think, at the moment, this podcast, the work here is about undoing the narrative that we are all buying into as spiritually developing people. And there seems to be in most medium stories, these repeating kind of tick box, this is how I came to spirituality way of behaving. It's like that's what we expect, that's what we need, that's what the public want. And as I'm developing my spiritual persona, I have to prove to you that I am the right kind of spiritual person because I've had these things happening, a big awakening that changed my life following a dark night of my soul. And I think part of our work on this non-fancy podcast is to talk about these things and discuss whether they're true and real. Now, what I'm not saying is that these people that have had these experiences haven't had these experiences, but I bet my bottom dollar that the majority of you listening to this podcast that are spiritually developing out there and interested in mediumship and spirituality are still waiting for that big moment of awakening. And if you're anything like me, when you do get the big moments of awakening, you don't really realise when you're in it. It's not like you go, aha, this is my journey, this is my path, and now I know I'm supposed to be spiritually developing. It's more like when you look back, you go, that's what that was. And I've probably mentioned this before, but I used to have a cooking business before I was a medium. I was still developing my spirituality, but I had this cooking business, and that was I was so blinkered with that being my path. And there was a period of time just before I gave up where the spirit world, I think it was the spirit world. I mean, I still don't know for sure, but I just feel like the spirit world were trying to show me that was not my path. But equally, I do believe we choose our paths. So maybe there was a part of me, maybe it was my spirit showing me that that wasn't my path. But what happened was I was working ridiculous hours, just ridiculous. And then I had a couple of things that kind of embarrassed me. I went to pick my daughter up from preschool and I'd been cooking, and one of the staff went, oh, what's that? Is that fish today? And I was like, no, it's lamb. And they went, oh, doesn't she smell like fish though? Oh my God. And I just felt mortified and embarrassed. I'd run out in between cookings sessions to collect my child and then obviously stank, so that was embarrassing. I went on a night out and opened my handbag and I could smell onions. It was not fun having a cooking business that came from home. If you are a cook, I doff my cap to you, because cooking is hard work. And then I had a farm shop that refused to pay me and said I hadn't delivered what I had delivered. And I had a freezer break and lost like £300 worth of stock overnight. And then I had an oven blow up. And at the time, it just felt like another thing and another thing and another thing. And I was really buying into that dialogue then of needing to hustle and not giving up at the first hurdle. And you've got to keep pushing forward if you want to be a success. You've got to keep going if you want to be a success. And what the spirit world did with me is they just asked me to take 1 week off my business. I was still allowed to deliver, but I wasn't allowed to cook. I wasn't allowed to think of new recipes. I wasn't allowed to do social media posts. I wasn't allowed to push it. And in that week, it really showed to me that how much time I was spending thinking about it, how much time I was spending, even when I thought that I was sitting down and relaxing, I was actually planning my business and thinking about my business. And once I finally unwound, and it was, I think it took longer than a week, if I'm honest. Once I'd finally unwound enough to let go of all the noise that I was creating, I realised that I didn't want to carry on with it anymore. So that in practical terms doesn't sound much like an awakening or a dark night of a soul, does it? It just sounds like somebody going through some experiences. But of course, this was the contrast, as Abraham Hicks would say, this was the contrast showing me what I didn't want so I could then focus on what I did. And what I was intending to do, funnily enough, was go and get a part-time job. And work for somebody else. I'd worked at Tesco on customer services and bloody loved that job. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to have ease. And, the irony being that, of course, my cooking business never turned a profit and I was nearly paying to do it. But in that hustle, one day it'll pay off, one day it'll pay off, one day it'll work for me. And so in just deciding to get a part-time job, and releasing all of that pressure, there was this huge space created in my energy, this release. And of course, there was huge amounts of healing to do. I was absolutely exhausted, broken from it. And so I started looking for part-time jobs. And then during that time, that is when spirit, and I do believe it was spirit, I've got nothing tangible to prove that to you, but I do believe it was spirit, started saying to me, why don't you offer some Reiki? You're a Reiki master. Why don't you start doing healing sessions for people? And the room from which this podcast is recorded used to have 7 freezers in it. And if you've ever seen it online, you know it's got my beautiful altar in and my twinkly lights. And it was just such an empowering thing for me, taking this space back and making it a beautiful room for me. And here's the irony, I even have got an access. I don't do in person anymore, but when I started my business and I used to do in person, I've actually got access to the road from this room. So people used to come in through my back gate and into my house without me needing to trail them through my actual private space. So it was all there for me, but I just couldn't see it. So I started doing a little bit of Reiki for clients, and I'm not really talking about Dark Night of the Soul anymore, am I? I might need to do that on another one. I'm talking to you about how I set up my business. But hey ho, that was something I was going to cover anyway. That just seems to be what's flowing today, so we'll go with it. So what I did was I just put it out there and said, I'm offering Reiki if anybody would like it. And if I'm honest, it was very much kind of, I don't think anybody will. I completely underpriced and undervalued myself. That's a lesson I think most of you who are going out on your setting up your business will come to understand, come to learn. And I just put it out there, and then I got a few people, and it didn't blow the doors off by any stretch of the imagination, but I got a few clients, and that was quite nice. And I decided to take a couple of weeks off I was lucky, we could afford for me to take a few weeks off before I needed to start really pushing the job hunting. And I think during that time I did, 4 clients, but then they referred other people to me. And then I just started thinking, I wonder if this is something that I could actually do. And then, what else? Then, oh God, I went for a aura photograph. And the lady, Monica, who took my aura photograph, said to me, "You've got a room at home that you're wondering what to do with." And that, of course, is this space that I'm talking to you from. And I said, yes. And she went, "They want you to use it for your spiritual work. Get on with that, please." And that was really important for me, was that just that little bit of validation, because one of the biggest things that always has held me back on my spiritual journey is I want to do it for the right reasons. And money is not the right reason, and feeding my ego is not the right reason. Some people come at healing because they want to fix people. I can fix you. Come over here. Look at me with my special Reiki healing power. I can fix you. I can save you. And that actually is not spirit and healing. That is ego and seeking validation. And of course, I'm not telling you I've never fallen into that trap. I've fallen into it many times, but that's how spirit taught me that. So I set up my room. I had some people, when I started, people were coming into my living room. So it wasn't particularly professional, but I just thought I'd give it a try. And then I kept thinking I could do card readings, but I'm not ready. I could do card readings, but I'm not ready. And then I spoke to my teacher and said, what do I need to do to sort of get ready to offer card readings? Because I'd really like to just start incorporating that with my Reiki. And she said, "What? I thought you were doing this already. I thought you were card reading for the public already. I thought you've been doing it for a couple of years." And I said, No, I've been waiting for someone to tell me I'm ready. And she said, "Well, that's not how it works. No one will ever tell you you're ready. It's up to you to decide." And that was such a big lesson for me. So then I started offering card readings, and then it really did start ticking over for me. I would do card readings and Reiki, and that was pretty amazing. Then I decided to start my own spiritual development circle, and that developed and that happened. And that was brilliant. Those first girls that I worked with in that circle, it was such a transformational thing for me and for them. And lessons, learning all the time, lessons and learning in how to run your business, in how to be a spiritual person, but also wanting to work with integrity and also wanting to earn a living from it, I think is something that a lot of us struggle with. As you know, I still work part-time in a non-spiritual job because I don't want that pressure. And that's something that has come again and again and again with me. Also, a lack of, self-love, I guess, but boundaries and barriers. So one of my absolute red flags, my failings, my problems is that I give more and more and more and more. So that's part of the reason I had to stop my membership program, because I was always trying to add more value, always trying to do more, and it was just taking over my entire life. And it's that kind of thing that you have to sort of learn to work through, where your barriers and boundaries are. Charging enough is a really interesting thing between wanting to help people, because I do genuinely feel like I want to help people, but equally that's my ego talking, isn't it? I'm wanting to validate my own existence through helping people, versus getting the right people in front of you. And price has a massive thing to do with that. Price absolutely has a massive thing to do with that. And so sort of learning always to pick through all these things, is just huge. It's just huge. In fact, I'm going to do another podcast on lessons learned in spiritual business, because there's stuff that I want to specifically talk about in that. So this is what I mean about, if you were to look at the facts of my journey and how spirit came to me, if we were to boil it down into bullet points, it would be like this. Me, completely lost, in a really bad space in my life. So yeah, the dark night of the soul, which I will cover properly in another podcast. Whoops. Me and my dark night of the soul days, me and my difficult days. And then my friend getting my grandfather through, and my grandfather proving that he was around, proving his existence in such an undeniable way to me, because I was ready, but in such an undeniable way. But not telling me I was going to be a medium, and not telling me that this was my journey, just coming through. And then me joining a circle with her and having all these crazy experiences in that circle, whilst believing that my path and my journey was in the cooking. I mean, I was a PA at a music school when my grandfather came through. So then I was working with spirit, and then I decided to do my cooking business. And although that was really, really absolutely soul-crushingly hard working, doing that business and staying up until 2 a.m. for things to get cold enough to go into the freezer, and constantly cooking and aching, my body hurt so much. But I learned so many lessons on there. And that's what I mean about it being a journey, is I needed to go through Home Cooked by Hannah, and I needed to break myself doing that so I could learn. And I learned so much about business and how business works and how to get yourself out there, and all of the stuff that doesn't really fit in with spiritual work. You know, doing social media and stuff like that doesn't feel spiritual, but you also accept that you've got to do those things to get yourself out there. You can't just lie there passively and expect the spirit world to hack the algorithm to get people in front of you. And so yeah, doing all of that, I can see how it was necessary for my development, but it wasn't comfy or nice, and it didn't feel spiritual. Cooking liver and bacon didn't feel spiritual. It felt necessary. But I was really buying into that. This is my hustle. This is my journey. This is how I'm going to work. That kind of thing. And then trusting, getting that relationship with spirit over many years, 5 years of sitting in a circle and developing, and realizing that I trusted spirit enough that when they asked me to stop for a couple of weeks, that I could do that and not wonder why or need to know an answer, but just to go, okay, if that's what you want me to do, that is what I will do. And then being open to the answer coming, but also understanding that I had to go through a process in that couple of weeks for the answer to come. And the answer was not, thou art going to be a light worker and share the word of spirit with the peoples. It was, I don't want to do this anymore. Simple as that. It was taking a step back and a breath back and allowing myself the space in my mind not to be thinking about it all the time, to actually realise how unhappy I was. And stepping back from it. I keep getting these Facebook memories at the moment. You know, when I was getting interviewed on the radio about my cooking business, and I was in the newspaper with my cooking business, more stuff than I've ever had with my spirituality. And hearing myself being so positive about it. And then it's so hilarious to me because I think one of the articles was printed and then 3 weeks later I'd closed my business because I was just telling myself that dialogue. I was just, this is what I've got to do, this. And of course, with any journey like that, once you've done a few years of it and you've invested all that time and your heart and your soul into it, it's harder to walk away from it. It feels like more of a failure. And I think for me, I was lucky in a sense, because I was so relieved when I really realised what I was feeling, that I didn't feel like I was failing. I just felt relief. And at that point, I didn't care what I was going to do, as long as I didn't have to do that anymore. And it got us through some really challenging times for me and my husband financially, but it was just brutal. It was just absolutely, completely brutal. So none of that, if you were a naysayer, would seem spiritual, would it? None of that would seem like a spiritual awakening path. You think a spiritual awakening path is going to be a vision, Archangel Michael popping up at the end of your bed and touching you on your third eye, and all of a sudden you're like Neo in the Matrix, and you can see that everything is different and wrong, and this physical place is a projection. But actually everything I share with you has come gently and practically, and less wow and woo-woo, and more gentle and feeling like coming home. And I knew this all along. And it is wow and woo-woo. I'm not telling you it isn't, but actually when you're in it, it doesn't feel like that. And that's why it's really important to reflect and sit and allow time to think about where you've been and what you've got through, because we spend so much time focusing ahead and where we've got to be and what we've got to do, that we forget sometimes to just look at where we've been and go back and sit with yourself on this timeline that we've created, and go back and sit with yourself and remember and experience where you were to see where you're going. And when you're looking ahead, please don't focus on the entirety of the mountain that you've got to climb, because that will guaranteed hold you back. Just know where you want to go, but keep that kind of woolly, keep that kind of fuzzy, but just allow yourself to take steps. And if you don't know where you're going, just follow what you want to do in the moment, because that's exactly what I did. I knew I loved Reiki, and I thought I'd just offer it out there and see if anyone wanted it. And then I knew that cards were amazing. I knew I had this great connection to spirit guides that I felt very lucky for, that I had worked on and honed for quite some time, not just that it was there and it was done and it was easy. And I wanted to share that with people, and I wanted to help people, whether that was my ego or my spirit or a mix of the two, who knows, but that's what I decided I wanted to do. And then I started doing that work. And then I realised the benefit that groups would have and people that wanted to learn, because I've always been, yes, I can do it, but you can do it too. That has never changed for me. I think because when I look back, as you know, I could feel spirit, I can see when spirit were working in my life, in my childhood. But if you had asked me before I started this journey if I felt like the spirit world were guiding me, I'd have said no. I didn't feel them. I wasn't consciously aware of it. So that, I think, is really empowering. I know some people would love me to have some spooky story about when a ghost stood over me in a graveyard and told me this was my future. But actually, I think there's something really empowering about the fact that there was none of that. I had no idea at all. And spirit didn't come in and say, this is where you're going to be, this is how it's going to be. What spirit did was gently, they showed themselves to me in it wasn't gentle, it was bloody mind-blowing, but they showed themselves to me. And then they took me to that group. And then that group ended, and then there was a gap where I just went and got on with my life for a bit, and then another group started and I went to that, and then I found another teacher and I went with that, and then I went to another teacher and I did that, and then I decided to do the Reiki, and then I decided to do the cards, and then I decided to do Reiki cards combo, which was always my bestseller, and then I decided to start running groups, and then I did some spiritual parties and decided that was not a path for me. Then I tried selling crystals and did really well with that, and then spirit came in and said, we want you to focus on other things. And I had to trust that, even though I didn't know what the other things were, that they were creating that space for me. So I sold all my stock and stepped away from selling crystals. And then, oh my God, then we're going really close in time now. So I can remember sitting in one of my circles and doing a channeled message from Spirit and saying, I can feel something coming, and it feels like a tidal wave, and it's just about to fall down. I don't know what it is, but it feels like everything's going to change. And everyone's going, yeah, I've been feeling that. A week later, COVID. And that's how it works with Spirit sometimes. Did I want to know that tidal wave was going to change everything, but we were going to lose a lot of people that we cared about for that? I mean, you can understand the ways of Spirit and still not wish to know the journey, if you know what I mean. I'm pretty sure, Mary, the story of the Bible, which, story, but being told that she was going to give birth to God, a child of God, I'm sure she didn't know how that was going to end, and I hope she didn't, because who'd want to know that all the way through, that heartbreaking story that she has. So, we have to, I don't know where that came from, just popping in there, philosophy on a Sunday for you. But it is that kind of thing. We knew the tidal wave was coming, and then it crashed. And then that was everything gone to me, because all of my work was in person. All of my clients were in person. And so because I had a bit more time, I fannied around online and did some lives. And then I was following, I did a social media course with Elise Dharma, and to learn more about how the bloody stuff works. And then one of the things that she said in that was really transformational for me was, if you can't take on 1,000 clients tomorrow, you haven't got a real business. And not that I want my spirituality to be a business, but it is a business, and you have to find that line between the two. But that inspired me to do my online courses. And so over lockdown, I recorded my online courses, and they just flowed out of me. The 6-week healing course and the Starting with Spirit course, it was Spirit all the way. Here's what we want you to say. Here's how we want to do it. It was just amazing. It was like this space was created that they just went with. And that was pretty cool. And I learned loads about what I knew from doing it, if you know what I mean. But when you're recording it for somebody else, you suddenly realise how much stuff you have learned and how much stuff you do know. And so I did all of that, and then just kept working online and got this amazing following online that I'm so grateful for. And then where did I go from there? Then I started working on my evidential mediumship and wanting to push through that. No, that was before the pandemic. I don't know. At some point in my timeline, I decided that I didn't want to just work with spirit guides anymore. I wanted to do evidential mediumship. And there were quite a few things that pushed me into that, and I had to work through my own resistance and my own I'm telling myself I can't do this, which I know I've mentioned recently, to be able to do it. There was a particular moment for me. I used to do clairvoyant nights with my friend Abby, and she would do the evidential loved ones in spirit, and I would do card readings. And just at that time when I was really jealous, if I'm honest, jealous of what she could do and the evidential messages, and I really wanted to do it. And I love Abby. She's an amazing human being. I wasn't jealous in a horrible way, but I just really wished that that's how my stuff worked. And we used to always go for a pint after a session in the local pub. And we were in the local pub, and there were some of the people that had come to our show in there. And this lady came up to me, and I knew her actually, and she went, "Oh, Hannah," she went, you well done. That was pretty good, yeah. Oh, but Abby, oh, to have a gift like yours. Oh, that's amazing. You just blew everybody away. Everybody was just so amazed by you. And I went home and cried. And now I look back and I realise that that was spirit trying to trigger me into going, well, I want to do it, so I'm going to bloody do it. But it took them months, years to be able to work through my decision, my idea that I didn't have that path available to me. So I was working on that, and I was developing that before lockdown, because I used to do mini demonstrations here. So I was working on that for a few years through lockdown, but not feeling brave enough to offer one-on-one readings for the public. And so I used lockdown as an opportunity, and I did tons of practice one-on-one readings for people. I mean, tons of them. And learnt loads. I did a mentorship program with a teacher, and another loads of online learning, loads. I mean, I worked harder over lockdown. And all these people that came from lockdown, and they were like, oh, I'm so rested. My husband and I, because he worked really hard too, we were exhausted. We had to have a holiday after lockdown, and everybody else was just getting back to it, and we were like broken. But that's kind of how it worked. So it wasn't, it was spirit working with me, through me, guiding me, helping me, getting that lady in the pub to say that thing to me, to trigger me, getting me to take a couple of weeks off. But it's not those profound, life-changing, tangible experiences where you go, oh my God, everything is different now. It's subtler than that. It's more self-empowering than that, because the spirit world are not about we will do it for you, we will show you, we will take you. It is more experience that, and then you'll see the truth of the situation. And hopefully you will on the first time. If you're like me, it might take you several goes. But that's the journey, that's the path. So I will cover Dark Night of the Soul at some other point. Sorry about that. But that's how it goes on this podcast, and that's why I love it so, because it's spirit. Just, this is what we want you to talk about. This is what we want you to remember, and go with it. And that's exactly how it is for you too. So don't hold yourself back, and don't wait for them to give you something momentous with great magnitude. We are not Frodo in Lord of the Rings. We are ordinary people living ordinary lives, being buffed around to get us where we could be. But that, to me, is truly magical.